Cindy Clemshire, Elizabeth Phillips, Catherine Robb. Let's start with the three of you. Good morning. It's great to see you again. Welcome back to the Capitol. And the committee looks forward to hearing from you this morning. Elizabeth, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Cindy and then Catherine. Is that okay? Okay. The chair recognizes Elizabeth Phillips. I have you here testifying on behalf of yourself for House Bill 748. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, go ahead.
As you said, I'm Elizabeth Phillips. I'm from Dallas, Texas, District 108, where I grew up and where I still live today. Thank you to this committee, and a special thank you to Chairman Leach for authoring this bill to prohibit the misuse of NDAs against child sexual abuse and trafficking victims, and for naming it after my late brother, Trey Carlock. It honors him and my family, our loss, and the countless survivors of child sexual abuse like him who didn't survive. I'm going to read my testimony because this has been a long time coming. I've been working towards this day for 5 years, and I want to get through my testimony in the allotted time. Thank you.
Time limit doesn't apply to this bill.
Thank you.
Take your time.
Trey was my little brother who was silenced to his grave by Kanakuk Ministries, a summer camp and global enterprise based in Southwest Missouri. Trey endured a decade of grooming and child sexual abuse by their popular director, Pete Newman, followed by a re-traumatizing civil litigation process that ended with a restrictive NDA. Sadly, a lot of truth dies with people because of NDAs, and that only protects bad actors, which is contrary to public interest. To me, that is the point of Trey's Law and this hearing today: public safety, protecting children. I've actually learned more about the extent of my brother's abuse in his death than I knew in his life due to the NDA he was under. Trey told a therapist, "They will always control me and I'll never be free," before he died by suicide in August 2019. He hesitated even to tell his story in confidential therapeutic settings for fear that Kanakuk would come after him again like they did an earlier John Doe. Now that I know what I know and have caught my breath, I'm trying to be a voice for Trey and the countless other victims of childhood crimes who are suffering in the shadows due to NDAs that restrict them from speaking in settings like this. Since my family was public about Trey's Kanakuk camp's abuse in his Dallas Morning News obituary, we've heard from so many other victim families with similar stories. 17 suicides and lives wrecked beyond belief all over the world. Kanakuk survivors assembled an advocacy website called Facts About Kanakuk, which launched in 2021 and has since received continuous tips with hundreds of abuse allegations against more than 65 unique perpetrators associated with Kanakuk, dating from 1958 to today. Texas is one of Kanakuk's largest markets. The same family that has been at the helm of Kanakuk throughout these decades. While victims have been lawfully hushed by NDAs, Kanakuk and its insurers demanded, behind closed doors, with attorneys who would gaslight and intimidate victims in depositions that led my brother to a psychotic break. My brother had many layers to his journey of injustice. First, he was groomed and abused from age 7 to 17 by a serial sex offender who was sentenced to 3 life terms in 2010. Trey was 20 years old when Pete went to prison. Then Trey was forced by the civil statute of limitations in Texas to file his civil case against Kanakuk before the age of 23, while he was just trying to finish college and also process unimaginable trauma, amidst a Christian culture applauding Kanakuk and hailing its CEO, Joe White, as a spiritual hero. Trey's civil case ended with a settlement that included a restrictive NDA, making Kanakuk and its representatives another perpetrator of abuse in Trey's tragic and unnecessary demise. Institutional abuse on top of sexual abuse. I've seen firsthand how NDAs and child sexual abuse settlements conceal decades of abuse for the sake of personal and institutional protection. Until very recently, when some brave survivors broke their NDAs to speak with investigative journalists, dozens of Kanakuk victims believed that they were the only ones who had been abused there because the story barely reached the media. I've spoken with many men and women who spent 20+ years believing that they were the only child abused at that summer camp or one of its affiliated entities. An Oklahoma woman in her 70s who was sexually assaulted the very first year Kanakuk opened its doors to girls shared her story of feeling crazy her entire life until she stumbled upon an article about 3 years ago that exposed the evils of Kanakuk. I was the first person she'd ever told, besides her husband. Delayed disclosure is normal for victims of child sexual abuse, if they ever disclose at all. So, when the floodgates opened and survivors coalesced around a petition asking Kanakuk to release victims from their NDAs, we garnered nearly 30,000 signatures. Kanakuk's response was a public statement and blatant lie that they do not use NDAs. Those of us who knew better called that out, so then they said they do use NDAs, but it's only at the request of the victims. Survivors called out that lie, and Kanakuk changed their tune again, admitting in an open letter from CEO and board chair Joe White that they do use NDAs, but it's their insurance company that makes them do it. And in order to avoid repercussions, victims should not disclose their settlement terms. Kanakuk won't come clean, and we're not giving them any more chances. We're going to change the law. The law on NDAs must be clarified because we cannot trust institutions to do the right thing. It's no exaggeration for me to claim this as a matter of life and death. I think we know what child sexual abuse does to a person's life, does to a kid. And I think we also know how healing happens. It's by sharing your story in safe places, finding support and solidarity. That's the whole basis of talk therapy and the Alcoholics Anonymous model, for example. When you take someone's voice away, especially a child's, you take away their most linear path to healing. Trey's law should be a welcomed and minimum measure of justice so that future victims of childhood crimes do not have my brother's outcome. There's a quote that says, "Shame dies when stories are told in safe places." Tennessee made itself safer in 2018 when they became the first U.S. state to pass a bill prohibiting NDAs in civil child sexual abuse settlements. And 18 states, along with U.S. Congress, have clarified the NDA issue for adult survivors of sexual assault. It's time we do the same for children, and Texas can be a leader on this. NDAs are for trade secrets, not trauma secrets. I get asked a lot since becoming more public about this issue on a national level. Why would your brother sign an NDA? Was he physically forced? Well, actually, when you've been abused and gaslighted and re-traumatized by intimidating lawyers on both sides who want to close a case, you're exhausted just trying to function. And then opposing counsel offers you 7 figures if you just sign on the dotted line. You need to be able to pay for treatment and a lifetime of care. You want to move on and hopefully heal. So you accept the payout, but it feels like a bribe. My brother referred to his settlement as blood money, as if he had betrayed his own soul to keep Kanakuk's secrets, and it killed him. So, I'm here before this committee to ask you to please remember Trey. I'm asking the Texas legislature to pass Trey's law this session as an urgent matter of public safety. I'm proud to be Trey's sister, and I hope Texas will be proud of Trey's law. Thank you, and I'm prepared to take questions.
Thank you, Elizabeth.